You have questions, we have answers. This is Jane Muller.
And this is Ken Muller. Welcome to our show, all about real estate with Ken and Jane. And for today's topic, Jane, we're going to continue with the buyer perspective on buying a house. So to recap from the last show, we started getting into the whole buyer process. You know what the considerations are for when they buy a home.
Yeah. But it's the right time to buy a home for them.
But it's the right time for them. And we got to the point basically where the buyers decided that they want to buy for various reasons. Mainly the interest rates are still low, even though they might be paying more than they would in another market. It all comes down to the monthly payment.
That's
fact
correct.
That the low interest rates offset the price increase that we're experiencing due to the seller's market. So for them, it's kind of a wash because it's the monthly payment that's the driving factor.
And also the lifestyle change. You know, a lot of people want to have a home they feel they belong and raise their family and be comfortable. Especially a lot of people work from home now. They may need a bigger space for everybody.
Right.
Yes.
And then we covered that a lot of the buyers are experiencing frustration because unfortunately with the home process, there's only one buyer that can be the winner. That can be the selected buyer. Right. And a lot of buyers are saying, gee, what do I have to do to win? I've already bid over asking price. I waived the appraisal contingency. I'm limiting my home inspections to the core structural safety, environmental items. And I'm still losing the house. And it's almost, I think it's almost analogous to like you said, the college application process. Basically it doesn't mean that just because you lost doesn't mean you're no good. It just means you're not the best qualified. It's
not about qualified. Just like college you mentioned, right, Ken? It's really the perspective. Some college more on the sports side. I mean, I would never get in. And some may on more academic, some more maybe other talent, right? It's really not right or wrong. A good buyer, a good buyer, a bad buyer. They all good, right? But it really depends how seller look at it, right? Today, I would like to share some strategies may help the buyer to win the home. It's like you play college. You all have most people would have a college counselor to guide you the process application. Same here when you're buying a house, you have a strategy how to win. I mean, when this COVID situation relaxed a little bit, we were invited a couple of really good buyer agent. They really first class agent helping the buyer to win the case. After one after another, they will share some their expertise, their experience. But in general, from my perspective as a seller, agent perspective, right? What seller looking for? First of all, you have to be showing you really love the home. You appreciate the home. Not by word, but by what you offer, right? So the first offer is very important. Initial offer is vital, right? So you have to offer what you truly think the house worth. Don't start low and negotiate, right? Because if you do that, you leave a very bad taste in seller's mouth. So you may, even though later on you may go super high, the seller feel you're not stable because you're up and down, right? Too much.
And we covered that in the prior show. That also brings up the escalation clause, which we also covered in the prior show, but the pros and the cons, and that gets to the whole emotional thing with the escalation clause, because if you're going to offer considerably less than the escalation clause will go to, that could leave a very shaky feeling in the seller's mind as to your genuine intention. Are you really in love with the house and really committed to offering what the escalation clause cap is at?
Yes.
If your push comes to shove.
Absolutely. It's not really you genuine or not as a buyer. It's perception. Sometimes perception is a reality, right?
And most of the time,
you even you genuine, but if you what you present is not quite. That's why the strategy came in, right? Here, it's very easy to follow a strategy here. Number one, I would recommend the buyer to pick attorney. You will say, why? I haven't bought a house yet. Why I need an attorney? First of all, you get yourself prepared. Like when I was pregnant, right? I didn't wait for after I gave birth, go out to buy the baby clothes, whatever we need. We got it done well, during the pregnancy. You just really get it ready.
Yeah, you just forgot the diapers, but that was No, just kidding.
Well, that was not a day topic. So, but truly, right, get the buyer attorney, chosen. It's not because it doesn't cost you anything, right? And if you have the buyer attorney chosen, and when you present an offer, some buyer I see they put who's the buyer attorney, who's everything. That serve 2 or 3 purpose. Why? Number one, you show how ready you are. It is seller market. Once the seller signed and take you 3 days to find a lawyer, and here somebody else came and outbid you.
And we're going to cover that
later.
Too.
But at the beginning, if you have the attorney, in our case, right, one seller chose, we just send out to both attorneys that review immediately. So in the seller's mind, you are more ready. So because you have the attorney picked out, you're ready to move forward with the process.
And another important thing with the whole process is having the loan officer, ready and accessible, because most list agents, good list agents, will call the loan officer. So don't if you're going to give a pre-approval letter from a list agent, from a mortgage broker that's not in Jersey or somewhere out in the Midwest or West, don't just have an 800 office number.
Yes.
You have to have the cell phone number, otherwise the list agent will be very frustrated. So that goes to having
longer.
It'll take longer to reach them, and that's going to delay the whole decision-making process. So you want the cell number. So from the buyer agent and buyer perspective, have the cell number of your loan officer ready, and the
email, or at least the email ready.
And even some buyer agents take it to the next level, and they'll have the loan officer actually reach out to the list agent and express the qualifications of
Once again, for the lesson there, that your loan officer not going to release any personal information. They just give the leasing agent and the seller confident. From 1 to 10, what's most likely, right? We're not asking how much your salary. No, we just said they never can tell us. No. But from 1 to 10, how confident you are. That's something general. But with that, the contract is one thing. The number on the contract. If you never closed, it means nothing. It's going to harm the seller, also harm the buyer. Because after you go through this process, if you can't, because your mortgage and it couldn't go through, all this investment in time and money will be gone. So it's heartbreaking.
Right.
So we actually is protect both parties, right? The seller and buyer. So have the loan officer, right, ready to do that. That's very important. Right. It's a good point.
Because the list agent will interview the loan officer, and they will ask them. A good list agent will ask the loan officer the questions: Is the buyer a 1099 or a W-2?
Yeah.
Because that can be. And if they're a 1099, they're going to want to know. They're going to want to know whatever they can find out about this, how long they've been in the business for. Yeah. Even though the loan officer cannot give you details, but give any financial income or earnings, but at least that's a very important question.
Yeah, because a lot of time, right, as a leasing agent, when we call the loan officer, we understand they can't disclose personal information. We're not expected to disclose. If we call them, said, well, is the buyer 1099 or W-2? If the loan officer said, why is that? Why you ask that question? We know that loan officer
is inexperienced.
Yes. So that's give us indication. The approval may not carry the same weight as the loan officer very thorough, did everything. For example, there was a loan officer reach out to me yesterday, for example, for offer multiple bid as well. So he reached out, he said, Jane, we work in the past and enjoying, so on and so forth. My buyer is your dream buyer. And they read very well, blah, 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 blah. They give you all this, confident knowing the buyer loan officer did the homework. And he didn't tell me anything specific. He just said the buyer had all the paperwork in. We already go through the system. We just need a contract and we'll be ready to roll. So that I don't have to worry about it, right? But when the people said the buyer handling everything we needed, and they are good, they not only, they approved basically. The just only thing they need is a property. So that's all. So that's really carry a lot of weight.
Approved and the credit is run.
Yeah, they've done everything. They don't have to tell me. They just say, this is your dream buyer. They have everything you needed. We have all document we need. They pre-approved. The buyer is no issue. The issue is your seller have to sign it. Once that we good. So that's really give the seller, I will pass on the message to the seller. So that will give the seller the confidence. Once we accept, it's going to be smooth ride. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Right. So that's two things then that basically a good buyer agent can do is have the attorney ready and have have the loan officer, not only the pre-approval letter, which is a basic requirement, but also
you must have a loan. Once again, for the buyer out there, right? Without your pre-approval letters, most listing agents don't even entertain the offer, because how we know you're qualified. That's the seller first question. 100% of my seller instruct me has to have the loan pre-approval. Otherwise, there's nothing to talk about.
Assuming you're buying with the mortgage, otherwise you need a proof of funds if it's a cash.
Yes,
purchase.
We want to see the bank statement to confirm that.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes.
So those,
and that's the two things very important. The third thing, personally, I think very important is when you write a contract, don't assume the seller and the seller agent know. You always write in the contract, say something like, this contract is not subject to selling or renting the current property. If that's the case, if you need, you have to write in there. Okay. Even in this competitive market, I did had a few agents won. Why? Because they prepared. They came in. They said, my house is subject to selling our home, right? And here's the contract attached to this, and we finished the home inspection contingency. It's certified. The mortgage commitment is certified. Where we at? Here's our client's buyer agent phone number, their loan officer phone number, if you want to check reference. That's really, thorough. So when we see that, we know you're ready. Yes.
Right. And that gets into a whole other topic when the buyer, the whole process of the buyer has to sell their current home to buy the home they want to buy, then there's a lot more due diligence that the listing agent has to do, because then you've got to basically be married to the buyer's sale contract, and then you've got to check on that buyer and that purchase, we'll call that purchaser's pre-approval letter, and the home inspection issues related to that that transaction, because if that falls apart, then your purchase falls apart.
Yes, that's like double the risk, double the workload. It's not the workload. It's at the end of the how it's really the percentage. You have to calculate the risk, how most likely you're going to close. So that's what it is. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. All right, all good stuff. Why don't we take a short break, and we'll be right back. Okay, welcome back to our show. We're discussing the buyer process, and we were talking before the break, Jane. I want to delve more into this topic about when a buyer comes along to the seller and they have a contingency. They have to sell their current home. We'll call the current buyer home A in order to buy seller home S, okay?
Yeah.
So there's a lot. That's something a lot of list agents. So it really depends on having your ducks in a row and how far along the buyer is in selling their home. Whether they first of all have to be under contract. Have they satisfied the home inspection? Has that purchaser of buyer's home gotten the mortgage? Those are all their various stages that home sale could be in, and that's all going to impact the seller's decision making process. Oftentimes, it could be a very strong offer, but you have to really investigate where the buyer is in selling their home, what stage they're in.
Yes, absolutely. I did have a experience recently. The offer was made not subject to buyers selling their current home.
Wait, when you say the offer was made, you mean the offer was not written in the offer, that there was not disclosed in the contract?
No, the agent, particularly in the offering covering letter, said this home is not subject to sell their current home, and which is, is in the covering letter, but it wasn't in the contract. When we went to an attorney review, somehow the buyer attorney changed the tune. Say this contract closing have to be coincide with the selling their home the same day. And then when we read that, we were shocked. So there was never been disclosed or discussed even, because the contract was signed, accepted based on no contingency.
Right.
So, and then personally, we're very experienced, even though there was misunderstanding, but I still want to give a buyer opportunity. So I called the buyer agent. I said, first of all, I wish you be, more truthful, right? But regardless, it happened. Let's deal with it. Can you give me the contract of your home? The buyer you want to subject to selling, can you give a contract? It turns out the buyer doesn't have a contract yet. The buyer said to the agent or the lawyer, I want to buy a house first and then sell my house later, because it's so easy to sell the house today, but how do I know I can buy a house? At the end,
well, that's wishful thinking.
Yes,
but, I mean,
that's
this market isn't. There's no way they don't have a chance of getting any seller to entertain their.
At the end, the seller attorney canceled. Suggests the seller cancel the contract, because this really, I mean, we have nothing to work with at that point.
Right, and that's where that's where the coaching and guidance of the buyer agent should come in to let their clients know that, and especially in today's market where the sellers can be highly selective of who they accept, that if you basically have to rely on selling your house and you haven't even put your house on the market, the seller's not going to have the patience unless the seller had like a long-term plan of maybe 6 months.
Building a house in a year or something.
But it's unlikely they would entertain that offer.
Yes, but being truthful upfront, right? That's really lead to another part, right? And when you say you want to buy a house, once we talk about what the buyer can do to make the offer more standing out, right? First of all, have your buyer attorney picked and have your loan officer ready to be, contacted. And another one is you really, really have to show the bank statement, for instance. Why do I have to show my bank statement? Because you will have a down payment, right, when you purchase, and deposit and down payment. If I were the buyer agent, I will also include a bank statement to show where the down payments are and the closing cost. So in that way, I mean, now as a leasing agent, we request that like a standard across the board.
It should be up front, because if you're buying a $500,000 home, you're getting a conventional mortgage, borrowing 80%, you're putting down 20%, so that would be $100,000
plus
payment.
The closing costs.
So it's important, right? Plus the closing costs. So you should provide a bank statement to show that you've got funds of $120,000 in liquid cash form ready for the cash funding portion of it.
Absolutely. And if I mean, now we cross border, we want that, from the buyer agent up front now. So when we have the bank statement, we will know they don't have the funding. So, and then we will know we wouldn't have to go that far. We wouldn't have to select them and later on cancel them. We would know they don't have. That's why it's important for buyer agent or the buyer to supply that. Why? If you give me the house, I will give it to you. And in contrary, without that document, if other people give that document, they would more ready. The seller more sort of like go through everything, saying that's good. They're more likely to pick the one, have all the information with it. It's like an application, like we say college. Right. It's like application. So the whole package has to be, have all this vital information for the seller make an informative decision.
It's like having all your ducks in a row and having it packaged. And obviously the price is a very important thing, but you have to have the organization, the attorney, the loan officer, cell phone, the pre-approval letter, and also the proof of the cash down payment, the proof of funds for the cash down payment. And then, and actually we can even take it a step further, which is not done, very uncommon, but we actually experienced this where one buyer agent was super organized and not only had the things we mentioned presented, but they also presented the attorney review letter that the buyer attorney, their proposed amendments to the contract. That was like one of the. That's a very unusual situation, but it's really.
But they won. They won the house.
And it's a pretty innovative and not a bad idea.
It's a very innovative thinking, right? I mean, we got that one. I think the agent did above and beyond because they are in the situation. They know this multiple bid. They know they have to sell the house in order to purchase this one. So they know they are on the lower chain of the buyers, right? So they went above and beyond. They produce a offer and a cover letter and let owner know, I mean, we are flexible with the closing, right? After they sell their house, they're going to stay with a relative and they can work with our closing, which is very comfort to the seller. And also, they propose the waive the home the appraisal contingency, and also the be added his condition for cosmetic except the major, the issue we talked in previous shows. And however, sometimes the lawyer protect the buyer. They may change it in the attorney review, but in this way, they want to speed up. They want to lose the deal. They want to get it and not losing it. So with the offer, they come with the buyer attorney review letter, which is the first time in my entire career. Think about it. That's a brilliant idea. I don't, they came in, the lawyer basically already, if the seller attorney happy with the change, they just sign it without a review. So basically, the seller signed the contract, go to the lawyer read it, 5 minutes later, they signed, that was it. But the seller attorney did made a revision, and then the buyer attorney signed it. It's literally... But
nonetheless, it expedited the whole review process.
Because much quicker.
It was much quicker. And let's talk about that now. What the importance, basically, when the offer is accepted, we went through the whole contract of sale, that you have an offer, it's accepted by the seller. The New Jersey contract is a starting point. The attorney's under attorney review. The contract is disapproved until the proposed modifications are agreed to by both the buyer and seller attorney. But let's talk about it from the buyer perspective. It's very important with the attorney process that you select an attorney that does real estate and that's going to be pretty much on the ball and responsive in a quick manner.
Yes.
And the reasons for that are because there's a risk during attorney review. You could get outbid because basically the seller under attorney review can cancel for any reason.
The buyer can cancel, so that's the seller. Yes.
Right. So from the seller's perspective, there's no great urgency to rush because, I have this one that I'm negotiating with, but if I get another offer that's better and more favorable terms, I could just tell my attorney, kill buyer A and go with buyer B.
It happened time after time because that's a heartbroken for the buyers. We had an experience that was back last year, I think. There was the buyer attorney, that was a very unfortunate situation. The buyer attorney took a few days off because of a family issue or something. And in the meantime, we started review, but it took a little longer, much longer. In the meantime, and even though we stopped the showing, because most of the time the seller continued to show until we conclude the review. Because as you mentioned, Ken, it's a two-way street. The seller can cancel or the buyer can walk. So there's two-way street. So normally they continue to show. But in that case, in good faith, and the seller stopped showing because, there's a lot of work for them too. So they just said that's good. So, however, in the meantime, someone saw the house before and bid lost the house. So we went with this buyer. But because the review took a little bit longer, the other buyer lost this house and lost another one or two houses, the following weekend. And then they came back to us, offered something the seller cannot refuse.
Right.
So at that time, as a listing agent, I said the seller is really good faith to go back to first buyer, let them know because, they're heartbroken. I told the buyer agent what happened, but unfortunately the buyer got really emotional. They felt the seller get greedy, the seller. In fact, I tried to explain to the buyer agent, I understand how you feel. I totally get it. It's so frustrating. Not your fault. Unfortunately, the lawyer wasn't available. So, but however, if other buyers more willing, they want to put money in the seller's pocket, they equally, we only can sell one family, unfortunately. So they refused, they didn't believe us, and at the end, the seller attorney, canceled the contract. So went with the second one. So that's happening. So for the buyer out there, once you're in the contract, it's truly in your best interest to finish the review as soon as possible to protect your right and contract. Because during the term review, the buyer can walk, so does the seller. There's no reason needed. They don't have to give any valid reason.
But here's another tactic that some buyer agents put into their contracts, which I think is not a bad idea. Some will write in the additional provisions of the realtor contract, no more showings if you accept our offer, and secondly, only backup offers only.
Once again, Ken, I get that, but first of all, let's say they don't have a legal stand. I lost a contract many years ago, right? That wasn't even in the seller market. That was like we went through multiple bid. And then on the contract says, backup offer only. We'll win the attorney review. But once again, we already went through a final and best. In good faith, seller should stay with us. But they didn't. And then someone else came in, just outbid us. We were not even given an opportunity. They didn't even come back to us. They just sent us cancellation one with the other offer.
Well, that stings a little.
I was even wrote in the contract, but you know better than me, right? In the contract, it doesn't take any effect until the lawyer finish review. So even you write on the contract, but until lawyer sign off, there's no binding. So, and secondly, in this seller market, sometimes I had a buyer demanding the seller cancel the open house. If I don't accept the offer by 5 p.m. on Friday, we withdraw. Let's really put a bad taste in the seller mouth. I had a similar, the case, right? That was last year in May, I think. And the buyer gave us an offer Friday afternoon, 5 o'clock, and then otherwise withdraw. The seller feel really demanding. The seller felt the buyer's unreasonable.
Well, I guess it depends which hat you're wearing. If you're a buyer agent, you're going to advocate for your buyer's rights, and you're going to try to protect them to the extent
you're not advocating. You're upsetting people.
Well, but again, it depends from their perspective. They're trying to protect their buyers and their rights in the house, but from the list agent's perspective, you want to keep the opportunities open to the extent possible, so your seller can isn't closing any doors prematurely.
Yes, I think the best thing is when the seller's hard, you start with a strong offer, everything's ready, and the seller feel it's a sure thing. I mean, when seller feel sure thing, most sellers stay with you. Most seller, in our experience, right, because this is such a recent market, the seller already got pretty good number. So any additional number to them, it doesn't make as much difference as when they need enough money to pay off their debt and a little bit left for themselves. At the moment, right, just be genuine and just, provide all the information you can provide and show the seller you're ready to go. So you are sincere and you're ready. Yes.
Okay, very good. Well, we're running out of time, so we're going to have to continue this for the next show and get into the whole steps once the buyer is selected and they've won the hard-fought battle. And then we're going to uncover their journey to buying the home in the next show, starting with the home inspection and all that fun stuff.
Absolutely. And thank you very much. Have a great weekend. See you next week.
Bye now.